Hey, it's me, AP, aka Mr. Movie Cheer, and welcome back to another video. And on this video, I'll be discussing the topic of should 80s classic movies get modern movie sequels? Now, why am I talking about this topic in particular? I think, I'm a big fan of 80s movies. I've recently just done a video with several different collaborators for the channel for a podcast episode on 80s movies, which is really funny. I'll put it in the link it into this video. But yeah, I'm a big fan of 80s movies. I grew up watching them, and we do get, we've had recently the Beetlejuice 2 movie come out, and an 80s movie, an 80s cult classic movie. And it kind of brought the topic to my head, just thinking, let's talk about this. Should some of these 80s movies, classics, these 80s franchises get modern movie sequels? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? That is what I'm going to deep dive into today on this video. So, why do we get modern sequels, first of all, of 80s movies? Why do we get it? And I think, for me, and again, this is all my own opinion, and I want to hear your opinion as well, but I think for a lot of it, it's nostalgia, isn't it? I think, like I said at the beginning of this video, it's for me, I grew up watching 80s movies. I wasn't born in the 80s, I was born in the 90s, but I grew up watching 80s movies, 80s action movies, your Arnie, your Stallone movies, like a lot of like 80s movies for me, sci-fi, Star Wars, all and Back to the Future. Big fan of just 80s. I think 80s and 90s for me are such great years for movie making, super amazing years. But the 80s in particular, I think there's a big nostalgia for that. And I think we all hold something there. There's certain movies I look back into the 80s and like stuff like Masters of the Universe, RoboCop. For me, that some of them, they have that cult-like status to us, and there is like a pure nostalgia around them movies where you just think, wow, I love them that much. I really enjoyed them. And I think, big Hollywood, production companies, they look at that and they see people's nostalgia for these movies, like your Top Guns, and think, ka-ching. It's true though, and that's what I think basically they look at it and they look at what people like and what people still talk about, what people have huge nostalgia for, and they think, how can we exploit that? That's what it is. That's what the big companies do. It's as movie fans, we see it differently. We watch the movies, we enjoy it, and I think that's good that we have that sort of separation. But big companies, I get it. It's a movie business. They're there to make money, and it makes sense. So I think they look at 80s movies though in particular. I don't think, like, it doesn't seem like they look at 70s movies. If anything, it's more like a reboots or remakes of 70s movies. But I think for 80s movies, they look at it still as an era. I think with music as well, it's very much similar with music and with movies. They're just like, it feels like an era that is still nostalgia filled, that we can kind of still bring into the present time and do something good and do something really cool with it. And I think the 80s is just one of them eras that is kind of very much beloved by a lot of people, and like I said, a lot of nostalgia for it. So I think that's why they do it. I think it's money and nostalgia. They see, movies that did well in the 80s that were hugely popular and think, how can we make something from that now? And they look to a sequel. Let's talk about now some of the sequels that I don't feel that needed to be made. And these is not a knock on all these movies, but I think some sequels I don't think necessarily need to be made. And I think we've had a few over the years that have been made from 80s classic movies. And I look back and I'm thinking, why did that particular movie get made? And a few come to mind. And again, this is not a knock on, I will get into it. I think, first of all, Coming to America 2, it wasn't a great movie. At the time, I think I watched it, I probably thought, oh, it's okay. But looking back, I think it's that thing sometimes you have them nostalgia goggles on, don't you? And you watch it and you're like, oh, this is actually quite good because it's fun. And then you look back and you're like, it was pretty bad. I thought Coming to America, the first one with Eddie Murphy, was superb. But the sequel was, I honestly couldn't tell you what happened. I think it was something to, he had a son, and he was like meeting his son. I think that was the premise of the story, but I honestly couldn't tell you anything else about that movie. Nothing, no memorable memorable thoughts of that movie. I didn't feel like it needs to be made. If anything, it's kind of like, I think sometimes it can tarnish a legacy of a really good original movie. I don't think it's really tarnished it so much, but I think it's like Dumb and Number 2. Like, why make a sequel to a classic? So you can't. Sometimes you just can't top it. Beetlejuice, the second Beetlejuice movie. Until recently, I was never a huge fan of the movie. I only watched the first one for the first time maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, and I wasn't keen on Beetlejuice, the first one. I said this recently. I think Sean, Media Collector Madness, he had it in his 80s video, and I mentioned to Sean, like, I'll have to rewatch it. And I rewatched Beetlejuice, the original one, obviously leading up to this new one coming out. And if I'm being honest, it's one of the movies, like I said, I've had many movies like that in the past, like Logan, where I watch them and I'm like, second viewing, I like it. First one I didn't. Second viewing, watch Beetlejuice second time round, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good movie, and I watched it a few times over like a weekly period. Just watch it before bed, and I really did like it. I thought Keaton was great as Beetlejuice, and it is a fun movie. I think really a cracking movie to watch around Halloween time as well. And I watched the sequel, and I think generally it seems like the same sort of reviews coming from a lot of people who I've spoken to and seen stuff online on YouTube, and a lot of people said there's a lot of plots, a lot of subplots going on in that movie, and a bit too much going on. I kind of walked out of the movie, and I didn't dislike the movie, but I kind of thought to myself, did they really need to make a sequel to that movie, to an 80s classic? Was there any need for a modern movie sequel? And I personally don't feel like it was a movie sequel that was warranted. I don't think it really added much to it gave a bit of an origin, but there was so much going on in that story where I felt like it was just too much at times, and it kind of took the enjoyment out of it a bit. And it felt like it was a bit forced, where the original felt like a bit more natural. The comedy moments, it felt like it was a bit, just repeating it sometimes. And again, I think maybe it could be one of those where I watch again Beetlejuice soon, and I'm like, yeah, this is a great movie. But some about that movie where it just didn't click with me in certain areas. Like, I walked out the cinema, I thought, yeah, it was a decent movie. I wouldn't say it was an awful movie. I wouldn't recommend anyone not watching it, but I just think, did it really need to be made? And personally, I didn't feel like it did need to be made. And another one like the Rambo movies. If I'm being honest, the first Rambo movie is amazing, and that had sequels in the 80s. And then we had the John Rambo movie in like the 2010s or 2008, around that time, a modern movie sequel again. But I don't really think that... I thought that was a good movie, but if I'm being honest, I think the first Rambo movie is all you need to watch. I think that's it. They shouldn't have even made the movies in the 80s, the sequels. So, but yeah, I think Beetlejuice 2, though, and Coming to America, I feel like they are two movie sequels, in my opinion, that probably just didn't need to be made. Not a knock on, maybe a knock on Coming to America 2, but Beetlejuice 2, not kind of a knock on it, but it feels like it was just, it was made for the sake of making a movie. The sequels that have worked for me. So sequels, I've talked about now, sequels that didn't work for me, that I didn't feel like needed to be made. Now these are sequels that, 80s movies that I feel warranted a sequel. I think they needed a modern movie sequel, and it worked. And I think Top Gun Maverick is the obvious one. Again, a movie I wasn't really super fond on. If I'm being honest, I think I watched the original Top Gun first years ago and didn't think much of it. Watched Top Gun Maverick, I thought it was great, and then ended up going back to the original Top Gun and really enjoying that as well. Top Gun Maverick was really good, and there's been talk of a third movie. Whether they do that, I don't know whether it would work. Would it be a movie too far? But I think Top Gun Maverick worked. I think it was very much very similar story and vibe to the original movie if you watch them both, side by side. Similar to like The Force Awakens with like A New Hope. Really, it feels like that same sort of, like, they just took the template, but they've updated it, but they give us still a solid movie. And I think it added to it a bit more, and it kind of left you wanting a bit more as well, I felt, with both of those movies. Beverly Hills Cop Axel F. And that has its criticisms, but I felt like this was an Eddie Murphy rebooted sequel that actually worked, because I think the reason why I'm glad they made it because I thought Beverly Hills Cop 3 was really bad when I watched it at the time. I need to rewatch that movie. But yeah, I watched Beverly Hills Cop 3. I didn't enjoy that. And I felt like it was a bit of a redemption for that franchise with Beverly Hills Cop Axel. I think, it's not a perfect movie. Is it a movie that's going to win Oscars, win loads of awards? No. It's an average movie, but it works. I think it works within that franchise. I think it just gives the fans of the franchise enough of nostalgia as well, which word, again, using that nostalgia. And I think it just delivered a bit more as well. It added, like, you got, an older Axel Foley in there. And I think it worked with the story, with it seeing it with his daughter as well. I enjoyed that. I know it had its criticisms. I've seen stuff online saying like a lot of them are too old. It's like 10 years too old. And I've heard them criticisms. I get it, but I still enjoyed it. Tron Legacy. Tron, I could not... I watched the first Tron movie. I did not like it one bit. And I watched Tron Legacy when that came out in 2010s. I thought it was amazing. I love the score by Daft Punk. I love the feel of the movie going into this video game world as a fan of video games. It was amazing. It just had everything, and they are doing a new one, a new Tron movie. It's been long awaited sequel to Tron Legacy. It's coming up soon, next couple of years. I think Jared Leto was in that. But I thought Tron Legacy was, again, I think that was an occasion where it outdone the original, in my opinion. I think it was 10 times better than the original movie, and it made me wanting more from that franchise. Another final one I want to discuss is Ghostbusters. Now, we had the 2016 female Ghostbusters, which I actually didn't mind. I think it was actually a decent movie. But that was kind of in its own universe. But we had Afterlife that came out in a few years back. And that was like a direct sequel to the original Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2. And I think that was, again, a very well done movie. And I think the way it worked with nostalgia, but it also built a new generation of Ghostbusters. And it's built this new franchise for the future. And I think that's where a modern sequel has really worked well with that. It's very much a modern sequel to a beloved franchise and rebuilt it for a younger generation, and also for the generation of Ghostbusters fans there, still having your original cast members joining with the newer cast members, which I think is a really clever idea. And I thought Afterlife, I've not seen the new one, Frozen Empire, just yet, but Afterlife was such a really good movie, and it had a lot of heart in that. I think it was a really terrific movie. I thought it was really fun to watch as well. So there's some of the movie sequels I think have worked, modern sequels of 80s movies. What I want to get to now is, why shouldn't some 80s movies have modern sequels? And which ones in particular? I've got a few to list here. I think some movies should be just left alone. I'm pretty sure there's like a clause or something with Back to the Future where they can't make any more Back to the Future movies within a certain period of time, whether it's like 50 years or 100 years or something like that. I'm sure I remember reading something like that. The directors or the writers had something in like a clause. But I think there's some movies that you couldn't. It would be weird to do a sequel, and I was looking on like Reddit at this as well on similar topics, and a lot of the same movies came up, and I kind of thought the same myself. Like Big Trouble in Little China. I don't think you could do a sequel to that, but I'm pretty sure I've heard recently it was either The Rock or John Cena were due to be in a sequel to that. I may be wrong. Maybe that was a rumor going around, but I just don't see how it could work. I think it would be absolutely bizarre. Whether it's a remake, maybe it's a remake. That would work maybe somehow. But that's a classic movie. The Goonies, another one. If you did a modern sequel to The Goonies, either it's the original cast or it's the cast and their kids, maybe. But I don't know. I just don't think it would work. I think that is such a beloved movie, such a cult classic. Flash Gordon, the 80s movie. I love that movie. I think it's a cracking sci-fi movie. I don't think it would work for a modern sequel with that cast. I just don't think it would work at all. I think that is, again, a movie that should be left behind. And one movie I really love is Masters of the Universe. It's a movie that I grew up watching, and I absolutely love that movie. And over the years, I've always thought maybe a sequel would be good, and I probably, flip-flop with this still to this day. But in reality, I think a sequel probably would have worked at the time with that original cast at the time. I think now, I don't know, I don't think it would work quite as well. And they are doing like a new rebooted He-Man. I think as well. I think it maybe would tarnish my love for that original movie. It's like people watch like the original Fright Night and then they watch. I've never seen part 2, but everyone says part 2 is absolutely garbage, and it's got a lot of the original cast in, but it's people just don't have that affection to it like they do with the original. So yeah, I think there's some movies that really should have some sort of like concrete, contract to say they never remake them. And I think Big Trouble in Little China, The Goonies, Flash Gordon, probably Masters of the Universe. I mean, I don't think a sequel at this point now probably would work, even though I would still probably like to see a glimpse of that sequel. But the conclusion to this, what do I think? What do you think? Should 80s classic movies get modern sequels? I think the majority we've seen have been pretty decent over the years. I think there's been a few ones that have not been great. I think what you've got to do with it is, first of all, you've got to have a reason to make it other than making money. I think you've got to have a good filmmaker behind it, who has a good story and who has a lot of passion for that particular original movie and the story, the characters. And they've got to have a new original story that's going to further the story, not just be the same old rehash of things, but add a bit more and add like a different layer to it, a new dimension to it, and make an exciting movie. I think sometimes, like I said, with Beetlejuice 2, I think it done some things that were good, but I think overall it just didn't really nail down for me the idea that there should have been a sequel. I think the original one was perfect. I think it's got to be done. It's got to be a positive sequel. It's got to be something that definitely has a lot of nostalgia in there, but also grows a pathway to new stories, new characters, bringing a new audience. And I think like with the Ghostbusters movies, where it brings in the older audience with the newer audience and mix a bit of both, the best of both worlds. Like, I think that's what you've got to do, and I think that's the only way it works. So I think for me, I'm not against them. Because I love the 80s movies. I think if they do these movies right, as long as it doesn't tarnish the original, I am all for them doing modern movie sequels. As long as it's not just a cash grab to do this character because there's popularity over it because loads of people are watching this movie on Netflix now and it's hugely popular for 5 minutes. Let's do a movie because there's a lot of heart, there's a lot of positivity, they've got a great script, they've got passion for the movie, and they're going to make an excellent modern movie sequel to our beloved 80s movies. Yeah, so I think they should, given the right circumstances. You're like, AP, that's such an in-between answer. But it's true. That is my honest answer to it. If you enjoyed this video today, guys, please do give it a like, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to link in also the 80s movie podcast we did recently. I'll link that at the end of this video, which was really fun. But if you enjoyed this video, let me know all your thoughts. What are your thoughts on the 80s movies and modern movie sequels of 80s movies in particular? Do you reckon it should continue to go on? Do you reckon it's a good thing, a bad thing? Let me know your thoughts. Remember to spread a bit of movie cheer, and as always, I will see you next time.